The Great Hungarian Plain was the site where an encampment was nestled. Thousands of tents in different sizes sprawled across the land as far as the eye could see. It was as if God himself perched there and decided to rest. Within the largest of these dwellings, a grand banquet was set. The visiting Roman ambassadors entered with their richly adorned armor that flickered in the torchlight. Laughter and conversation filled the air as the guests made their way to the long wooden table overflowing with meat and mead, an array of wild boar, roast venison, fresh fruits, and spiced breads. While the guests were served with golden goblets etched with intricate Hunnic motifs, the most powerful man there sat at the head of the table, served with a portion of meat on a wooden trencher. Despite the wealth he could amass from the conquered lands, Attila the Hun's way of life stood as a striking contrast. He neither cared about riches nor novelty, he only cared about conquest. Such was the life of the Scourge of God. Amidst the endless expanse of the Central Asian steppes, Attila, the future conqueror, was born into a world on the brink of monumental change. His early years were painted with the backdrop of his people, the Huns, embarking on their path to power. The Huns were once nomads, which is partly the reason why their history had been unclear. Stories of their origins were passed down from generations orally, and nothing could be absolute with them. Still, their merciless conquest of the Alans and the invasion of the Pontic steppes heralded the start of an era where their authority was only beginning to be heard through the realms. Their footprints were embedded deeply into the European terrain as they drove the Goths by the thousands toward Roman cities in the lower Danube for refuge. This incursion into Europe set the stage for the birth of one of history's most formidable leaders, Attila. Attila's early life was steeped in this tale of his people's relentless conquest. Along with his brother Belda, Attila was born into the Hunnic Empire's most powerful family between 395 AD and 406 AD, ruled by their uncles Oktar and Ruga. They were groomed to rule, learning the art of archery, sword fighting, and lasso use, as well as understanding how to ride and care for horses, and both acquired training in military and diplomatic tactics. Attila was far from the simple barbarian the Romans perceived him to be. Instead, he was a product of calculated education and stern Hunnic traditions, a child destined to lead an empire. While he had an early life marked by training and acquiring knowledge, Attila's life truly began when he and his brother inherited the mighty Hunnic Empire after the uncles died in 434 AD. Oktar, the western king of the Huns, had broadened the boundaries of the empire into the vastness of Germany. His rule ended with an ironic twist that made its way into the whispered legends of his people. A king, mighty in conquest, had met his end by overeating. Meanwhile, his brother Ruga was the Eastern overlord, wrath to the Eastern Roman Empire. He was feared and respected in equal measures as Oktar. However, like his brother, Ruga's end came as abruptly as a storm, struck down by lightning during an invasion of Thrace, the place where his ambitions finally laid him to rest. In 434 AD, Attila and Bleda ascended the throne, stepping into the shadows of power cast by their uncles. The empire they ruled over now spanned from the Rhine region to the borders of Sasanian Iran in the Caucasus, a vast landscape now under the Hunnic influence. Attila and Bleda's reign began with a strategic alliance with the Western Roman general Aetius. He was not a stranger to the Hunnic life, having once been a hostage of the Huns. United by a common purpose, Attila, Bleda, and Aetius turned their forces against the Burgundian kingdom of modern-day Poland. The two brothers would continue to support Aetius, their military might bolstering the Roman general as he quelled both internal revolts and threats from various Germanic tribes like the Franks, Visigoths, and Burgundians. Attila and Bleda were forging a legacy, and the world was starting to take notice. Attila and Bleda were now kings who found themselves balancing precariously on the precipice of war. Before their uncle Ruga died, he delivered an ultimatum to the Roman Empire, demanding the release of fugitive Hunnic princes or facing the wrath of all-out war. And so it was in 434 AD, in the city of Margus under the sweeping canopy of the heavens, that the peace treaty was inked. A pact whose terms required the Roman Empire to fill the Hunnic coffers with a weighty 700 pounds of gold annually. The Roman Empire complied, but the peace did not last long. Then in 441, like a wolf drawn by the scent of vulnerable prey, the Eastern Roman Empire led its armies to the newly established Vandal Alan kingdom in North Africa. With the Roman forces distracted, Attila and Bleda saw a golden opportunity. The Huns invaded the Balkans, forcing the Roman army's march towards Sicily to be halted. There was no other option. They had to pivot, face the Huns, and brace for the onslaught. However, Attila and Bleda did not see their actions as transgressions from the peace treaty. It was merely avenging the wrongs committed against them. The Bishop of Margus had stolen treasures from royal Hunnic tombs, and Rome had failed to return the Hunnic fugitives they promised. To the Huns, these were unforgivable injustices that called for retribution. The Huns then surged forth in 443 as the hooves of their army's horses thundered across the continent, reaching as far south as Constantinople. Cities like Naissus and Serdica became spoils of war for the Huns. With the Roman Empire reeling, Attila twisted Theodosius's arm into a new agreement. The terms were steep. The Romans would deliver the fugitives, and the Hunnic Empire would receive a staggering 2,100 pounds of gold annually, including an upfront payment of 6,000 pounds for arrears. As the dust of conflict settled, the ensuing 2 years were silent. What Attila did during this period remained a mystery, but by 445, Attila emerged as the sole ruler of the Hunnic Empire. Bleda was no more, apparently assassinated by his own brother. In the year 447, Attila cast aside peace and focused on the Eastern Roman Empire. He launched what would be remembered as the fiercest assault on Rome yet. As the sun rose, it bore witness to the terrifying conflict at the river Eutus. Despite suffering significant losses, Attila's war machine advanced relentlessly. The Romans fell and their ranks were decimated. The Huns moved forward to Chersonesus on the Gallipoli Peninsula, leaving destruction in their wake. Attila and his warriors swept through the Balkans like a storm, toppling more than 70 cities and tearing deep into the heart of Greece. They were only finally stopped at Thermopylae. In the aftermath, another negotiation was set, a peace treaty, more punishing than before to the Romans, but inked in favor of the Huns. Now, Attila's unstoppable power extended over Scythia, Germania, and far-off Scandinavia, referred to as the Islands of the Ocean. Up until then, Attila and the Western Roman Empire had been at peace, thanks to a cordial relationship with General Aetius. However, Princess Honoria, sister of the Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III, disrupted everything. Chafing under the confines of an impending arranged marriage, Honoria turned to Attila. She sent a ring, a tangible plea for help. To Attila, this was not just a ring, it was a promise of marriage. He saw an opportunity and seized it. Attila claimed Honoria as his newest bride amongst his several others and demanded nothing less than half of the Western Roman Empire as her dowry. Emperor Valentinian III refused, but he might as well have spat on the face of death. Without hesitation, Attila waged war against the Western Roman Empire. While some may place blame on Honoria's actions, many historians agree that it was merely an excuse for Attila's growing ambition to conquer the Western Roman lands. And the drums of war began their deafening beat. Aetius could hear them loud and clear. Despite his years of relentless campaigning, he knew Attila was an unstable ally, even more so an enemy he couldn't defeat. Swallowing his pride, Aetius asked his former enemies for help. The Visigoths, Franks, Burgundians, and Alans, the armies he had decimated years before, were now under the threat of a looming Hunnic invasion. And the barbarians understood this. Thus, a coalition of armies against the Huns had formed. The day of war had arrived. Attila led his legions against the forces of Aetius and Theodoric, the king of the Visigoths. The Roman infantry stood stoic, but the Visigoth cavalry was the key. Their thunderous charge into the Hunnic ranks set the pace for the battle. Under a rain of arrows and amidst the chaos of hand-to-hand combat, they seized control of the hill, a critical vantage point. But the price was severe, culminating in the fall of King Theodoric. His death, however, motivated the Visigoths to stand their ground, pushing the Huns back. As dusk fell, Attila and his warriors found themselves encircled, their fate seemingly sealed. But Aetius, demonstrating the cunning that made him formidable strategies, chose not to finish the Huns. This puzzling mercy was a masterstroke. The Visigoths, longtime antagonists of Rome, remained a formidable force even with the Huns subdued. Aetius's decision was met with outrage from his allies, with the newly crowned Visigoth king, Thorismund, voicing his dissent. Yet Aetius prevailed, persuading the young king to secure his rule at home against potential familial rivals. The wisdom behind this became apparent as the once mighty Visigoths began to falter without a common enemy. The Battle of Chalons was not marked by definitive victory, yet for Aetius it was a tactical triumph. He had managed to humble the great Attila and weakened the Visigoths, allowing the Romans some respite. Not a single Roman soldier was lost, preserving their only army in Gaul and securing Roman control of the region. This was the only defeat Attila experienced. He retreated his army back to Central Europe, plotting his revenge. In the year 452 AD, Attila turned to Italy. Cities like Milan and Aquileia bore witness to the fury of the Huns, reduced to smoldering ruins under Attila's assault. Yet, amidst the havoc, a pivotal encounter occurred. Attila met with Pope Leo I, and this meeting, veiled by history, led to the Hun king's surprising decision to withdraw his forces. Historians debated about the truth. It was either the Pope was astoundingly convincing, or Attila's forces suffered logistical problems and had to turn back anyway. In the following year, Attila found a new bride in Ildiko. Amidst the celebrations, fate took a tragic turn. That very night, in the privacy of his quarters, the invincible conqueror met a sudden and unglamorous end. Attila, the menace of the Roman Empire, was felled not by a warrior's sword, but by a simple nosebleed, believed to be caused by a brain hemorrhage. Thus, with a cruel twist of irony, the mighty Attila the Hun breathed his last in his marital bed. The Hun soldiers gathered at the morning of their leader's death. The very knives they used to cut their hair were used to slash their own cheeks. This was done because they believed that the greatest of all warriors should be mourned not with tears or the wailing of women, but with the blood of men. Attila the Hun's final resting place was a riverbed. But beyond that, the men who carried his golden coffin enclosed in silver and iron followed him in the afterlife, so that no one could ever spit on the grave of the Scourge of God.